All right, so we'll say good evening, good evening. Let's pick up. So we left off a little bit on a cliffhanger last night. So we left off actually on Yud Beis Amud Aleph 12a, and we left off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up from before the lines get wide. So if you remember again, our discussion was focused on the concept that when you open reciting the bracha, thinking that you're going to go ahead and conclude it one way, but then ultimately, again, the bracha concludes in a different way. So, for example, you go ahead and you begin Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam, thinking that you're going to be drinking wine, and then it turns out that it's beer. So, what's the halacha? Do we look at the beginning of the bracha, or do we look at the end of the bracha? So, the Gemara says, Tashma, Shachris Pasach B'Yotze'ar V'Sim B'Ma'ariv Aravim. So, in Shachris, if a person began Berachos Kriyas Shema by saying the bracha of Yotze'ar, but he ended up with Ma'ariv Aravim, what's the halacha? Lo yatsa. One has not fulfilled his obligation. Pasach b'ma'ariv aravim v'siyim b'yotze'ar. But if a person began with ma'ariv aravim and he ended with yotze'ar, yatsa. Ultimately, again, one is yotze. Arvis in ma'ariv pasach b'ma'ariv aravim. If a person began the bracha with ma'ariv aravim, v'siyim b'yotze'ar, and then you finished it off with yotza moros, lo yatsa. You're not yotze. Pasach b'yotze'ar v'siyim b'ma'ariv aravim, yatsa. But if you began with yotze'ar and you end with ma'ariv aravim, ultimately, you're Yotze. What's the principle? Right? What's the rule? Klalo shel davar hakol holich achar hachitum. Right? The klal is everything goes after the conclusion. Everything goes after the hakol holich achar hachitum. Everything goes by how you end. By how you end. So therefore, as long as one ends the bracha in the correct way, then halacha l'maisa, one ultimately again is Yotze the bracha. So we'll say the Gemara says not necessarily. Shiny Hassam, this is different to we'll say first wide line, Yud Beis Amud Aleph, to Ka'amar Baruch Yotzer HaMa'oros. This is different because remember again, in these cases over here, you're finishing off the particular bracha with a restating of the actual bracha itself. So maybe in that kind of case, even if you have a little bit of a flawed mindset at some point in the bracha, if you're ending off by restating essentially the bracha in its totality, that's when you're Yotze. So Hani Chalarav, Damar Kol Bracha Shem Ba'as Karas Hashem. In a bracha, Shapir. So that makes sense according to Rav, who says that any bracha that doesn't have the name of Hashem is not a proper bracha. Elo, the Rabbi Yochanan Damar Kol Bracha Shem Malchus Eino Bracha, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that really the ikar of a bracha is Malchus, Melech HaOlam. What is there to say? Ella kevan da amar Rabba bar Ula kedei lahaskir midas yom balayla umidas layla bayom. But rather, again, what says we saw already a couple of days ago that there's a concept in Berachos Kriyas Shema that in the morning to make mention of night and at night to make mention of day. Therefore, what? Ki ka'amar bracha umalchus meikara atar va'ka'amar. Whenever you recite the bracha for Berachos Kriyas Shema, your intention is always to go ahead and recite a bracha on the dynamics of day and night. So it could be that Berachos Kriyas Shema is a little bit of a different animal, because since again, even if you mess it up a little bit by day, you mess it up a little bit by night, because the bracha inherently contains elements of day and night, therefore the bracha will still be effective. So Tashma, let's analyze a bit more. Tashma miseifa, klalo shel davar. Here is the rule: hakol holich achar hachitum. Everything goes ultimately by how you end. So specifically, when it comes to brachas, we're not as concerned about what kavana, what intention you have over the course of the bracha, but rather what we're focused on is what is your intention at the conclusion of the bracha. Klalo shel davar la'asuyim. It says the Gemara, when you say klalo shel davar, what does that come to include? My lav la'asuy hada amran. Does it not come to include the cases that we said before, right? Regarding the mix-up between beer and wine? No, that's not what it comes to include. What it's coming to include? La'asuye nama v'tamri. It's coming to include the case of bread and dates. What is the case of bread and dates? So both say this is actually very interesting. Hechi dami. What's the case? Oh, sorry. 1 second. Sorry. What is the case? Hechi dami. Ilema da'achol nama v'kasar detamri achol upasach hadaiti detamri v'sim v'denama. So we'll say, maybe you're going to say it's like this. The case is where I'm eating bread, but I thought, for whatever the reason, the bread was dates. Right? I didn't realize I was eating bread. I thought I was eating dates. So what happened? So I began Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam. I was about to say Borei Priya Eitz on dates, but before I concluded the bracha, I recognized that it was bread, and so I ended off Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. So the Gemara says Hainu Bayon. So that's the same question we had before. By wine and beer. It's the same question. Well, Tzricha, no, rather, what's the case? This is actually interesting. Gigon Da'achol Tamri. Person was eating dates. The Kasavar Nama, but he thought it was bread. So what happened? So upasach b'dinama v'seim b'ditamri. So he began Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, thinking that he's going to end Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, but instead he catches himself and he says Berei Pri Eitz. So what's the halacha? Yatza. Why? Ta'afilu sim b'dinama nami yatza. This is actually fascinating. The Gemara suggests, because even if you said Hamotzi on dates, you would still be Yotzei. Why would you be Yotzei with Hamotzi on dates? Listen to this. My taima, the tamri nami mezon zaini. Why? Because dates also satiate like bread. Fascinating. Also, we have this concept, that the Gemara talks about it often, about the satiety qualities of dates. They're almost bread-like in nature. So it's actually interesting. Now, we don't paskin this way, but technically the Gemara says if you were to say hamotzi on dates, you would be yotzei. So we'll say, but what is the bottom line for our question, right? Remember, again, we have a fundamental question. What's our question? So it has everything to do with your eating, but because dates have a bread-like quality of satiety, therefore you're yotzei. No, but apparently there's something different about the satiating quality of dates, that they are bread-like. Now remember again, they're not like the dates you buy in the store. Like you ever see like Eretz Yisrael dates from the tree, right? Like they're zaftig, like they're significant. So apparently, I guess if you eat enough of them, they fill you up just like bread. And that apparently is unique quality by dates that other foods do not have.
And you would have to bench because you made a motion.
So it doesn't sound like you'd have to bench on it. We wouldn't go that far to actually require your birkas hamazon, but it sounds like bidi eved. What the Gemara is suggesting over here is that any food that has bread-like qualities could technically be covered under hamotzi. Now, again, I want to be clear. We don't paskin this way. Right? If you were to make hamotzi on dates, what we would tell you to do is you have to remedy that by saying Baruch Shem Kivod Machusodi Alam Ba'ed, and then making a new bracha Berei Pri Eitz. So we don't pass in this way, but it's interesting to note. But one second, let's try to answer our original question. What was our original question? And we'll say this happens all the time, right? I'm holding an item. I'm saying Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. I think it's one thing. So when I say the first part of the bracha, I think I'm going to end in a certain way, and then I realize, it's something different. So I say, Shakol Niyeh B'Dvaro. Right? So what's the halacha in that kind of case? So actually the way the Shulchan Aruch paskins is Hakol holech achar hachitum. Even though ideally when you recite the name of Hashem in a bracha, you are supposed to be explicitly aware of how you're going to conclude that bracha, but if you were not, or even if you were mistaken, as long as you have the right das when you conclude the bracha, you're good to go. You're good to go. So in other words, you started a bracha with a mistake. So just to give you a simple example, right? I go ahead and I have a cup of beer in my hand, and I think it's wine. So I say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam with the expectation that I'm going to finish that how? Borei Pri Agafen. Then mid bracha I look inside and I'm okay. And I say Shakol Niyeh B'Dvaro, I am yotzei. Right? I fulfill my obligation. Why? Hakol holech achar hachitum. Everything goes by how you finish. So good. So that's an excellent question. So remember, right? So Derek's saying, we're only talking about a case where you say, Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, and then I realize a mistake. What is Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam? Borei. And then ultimately I realize, it's beer. So we're going to see that in general, you could correct bracha mistakes as long as you do it instantaneously. So if you remember what we say, toch kedei dibor, which we'll get into, if you remember pretty much like instantaneously, you just kind of like forget that happened and go ahead and conclude the bracha in the right way. We'll say it's also interesting if you think about it like al derech hashkafa. There's a profound insight into this also of hakol holech achar hachitum. Everything goes by how you end. Meaning what? I will say that at the end of the day, we spoke about this in Daf Yomi actually a day or so ago, that so often in life what ends up happening is we start things and we don't finish. Right? The proverbial life closet is filled with half-started life initiatives. Right? I start out, it's all exciting, it has that new initiative smell, and then I lose interest. And when the Gemara says over here, and it's really such a profound statement, Hakol holech achar hachitum. Really success is determined by how you finish. Now, again, to be clear, there are definitely many times in life where finishing is beyond our control. And because of whatever the reason, right, I just don't have the ability or the wherewithal to bring something to fruition, in which case success is based on effort. But in situations where you do have the ability to bring something to fruition, to completion, then ultimately success is determined by bringing it across the finish line. Incredible yisod. Let's go right there. Says the Gemara, Omer Rabba Bar Chinina Sam Mishmei Derav Kol Shelo Omer Emes V'Yatziv Shachris The MS v'emuna arvis lo yatzei chavaso. If you don't say MS v'yatziv in the morning or MS v'emuna by Ma'ariv, you're not yotzei. Now remember again, I will say the halacha is that by Kriyas Shema, there are brachos before Shema and brachos after Shema. So just like you have to recite the brachos before Shema, you also need the brachos after Shema. Shene'emar, because the pasuk says lahagid baboker chasdecha ve'emunascha balela. So we'll say beautiful pasuk in Tehillim. David HaMelech says lahagid baboker chasdecha. I will speak about your chesed, your kindness in the morning, and I will rely on my belief in you at night. There's actually a very profound idea because remember David HaMelech explains what do morning and night represent. So boker represents the time in life when everything is good, right? The sun is shining, the birds are chirping. Everything is great. You know, when it's daytime in life, so to speak, everybody sees the chesed, the kindness of God. At night represents the difficulties or adversity of life. So sometimes in those times of moments of adversity, the chesed, the kindness of God is not as apparent. So what do you rely on in those moments? Your emunah. And your emunah tells you that even when you can't see the kindness or feel the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's still there. It's always there. Just because you can't see it, just because you can't feel it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So the idea over here is that both in the morning, right? So in the morning you're saying MS v'yatziv, and in the morning you're saying MS v'emuna. All right, beautiful. I both say some so interesting halachos over here. When you daven, now specifically when they talk about davening over here, they talk about Shemona Esrei. So when a person davens Shemona Esrei, what's the halacha? Kishu koreh koreh bebarach. When you bend down, right? When you bend down by Baruch. Ukishu zokiv b'shem. And then again, you go ahead and kind of put yourself straight by the time you recite the name of Hashem. So what it's actually very important. So in other words, at Shemona Esrei, the times that we bow, right? So I say Baruch, right? So at Baruch, I bend my knees. Ata, I bend down. And as Hashem, already I'm supposed to be standing up. All right, we'll see. There's an interesting discussion about whether I'm supposed to say Hashem kind of as I'm getting up, or I say Hashem after I've stood up already. So the Gemara says, what's the reason? Hashem zokef kifufim. It's very beautiful because the pasuk says that Hashem straightens out the crooked, which is so beautiful. So the idea over here is that when I'm bending, right, obviously I'm crouched over. When I say the name of Hashem, suddenly I'm able to go ahead and resume a straight posture. Which I will say, such a beautiful imagery. Do you know what belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for you? Belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you the ability to stand tall. You know, I was having a conversation with someone today. It was just so interesting. So this person who's not especially affiliated has a child on a college campus, local, and talking about just the stuff that's happening on college campus, unfortunate anti-Semitism and everything. So the parent said that he told his child, you know, when you're on campus, just like don't look Jewish. Don't look Jewish, right? There's no need. You know, it's fascinating. So when you call an Uber, don't use a name that sounds Jewish. And the person's telling me this, and I thought, like, it's so sad. It's so sad. It's just the opposite. Being Jewish and having a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't give you the need to cower and to fear and to hide. Just the opposite. Hashem zokif kifufim. When I have HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm not afraid of people. Right? I'm not afraid of what I'm going to encounter. I don't have to hide who I am. Just the opposite. I celebrate who I am. Because the more connected I am to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, literally again, the more stiff that posture is. Right? The more upright that posture is, the more pride I have in who and what I am. Such an incredible yesod. It's so important for these days. Meisvei, mipnei shminachas, but the pasuk says, bow before my name. So the Gemara says, Miksiv bishmi, does it say, when you say my name to bow? Mipnei shmi, because of my name. So the Gemara says, ksiv. That's what it says. In other words, yes, when you hear the name of Hashem, like we have this, for example, right, on Musaf on Yom Kippur, right, when we have it in the Chazar Sashatz, when we have the Kohen Gadol's Avoda, right, and what do we say? That when they used to say the Shema Mufurash, Shema of Hashem, what would everybody do? Hayukorim mishtachavim umodim. So yes, there is a time, absolutely, when one hears the name of God, to humble oneself in the presence of that name or by hearing upon that name. But other times, hearing the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is what gives me the strength and what gives me the confidence to actually stand up straight. It's a beautiful dynamic. Sometimes the name of Hashem causes me to bow down in incredible humility, and sometimes the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows me to stand straight with absolute pride and confidence. So beautiful. Amrali Shmuel Lechia Barav. So Shmuel said to Chia Barav, Bar Urion. Bar Urion. So we'll say, so this is Shmuel talking to Chia, and Shmuel called Chia a Bar Urion. Bar Urion means literally a son of the light. What's a son of the light? Talmid Chacham. Right? We'll say a person learns Torah, right? Torah is light, Torah is life, Torah is light, and Torah is life. A person who learns Torah is a son of the light. Such a beautiful expression. So Shmuel said to Chia, let me tell you something nice that your father Rav said. This is what your father said. When you bow down in Shmona Esrei, you bow down at the word Baruch, or kishu zokef b'shem. Right? And when you go ahead and you put yourself upright, you're supposed to stand upright again when reciting the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Good, well, so let's just go a little bit further. Yud Beis and Beis. Rav Sheshes is actually very beautiful. Rav Sheshes, Kikara, when Rav Sheshes would bow down, Kara Kechizra, he would bow down like a staff. Now I will say, now look at Rashi this moment. Kechizra, Rashi says, Shevet biyad Adam, v'chovto klapi mata basachas. We'll say, if you can imagine for a moment, like, if this is a staff, right, so how do you bend the staff? Like that, right? It goes down at once. So too again, Rav Sheshes, when he would bow down at once. I will say, what I'll point out to you, if you notice, even in Shmona Esrei, we have two different kinds of bowing. Right, let's say at the beginning of Shmona Esrei, or by the bracha of Magin Avram, or Atov Shimcha Lechanei Elodos at the end. So there's like a two-step bow. Two-step bow, right? There's a bending of the knees, and then a bending of the upper body, and then ultimately coming upright. As opposed to by Modim, right? What happens by Modim? Modim is just like a straight bow. No bending of the knees, straight bow. So the Marshal would say that's what we're referring to. When a Sheshes would bow, he's omitting the knee part, omitting the knee bend, and rather again he's just bowing straight down. And what happened? Because Zokif, when he would go ahead and kind of straighten himself back up, Zokif kechivya, he would straighten up like a snake. Apparently, when a snake lifts itself up, it first lifts up its head, and then the rest of the body follows. I was supposed to say, what's happening over here? So again, if you notice this, so essentially, if Sheshes would bow, right, he'd bow like this, and then when he would get up like that. So we'll say, so what's the pshat? So the Marshal says something very beautiful. The Marshal says, why didn't he just get right back up? Because if he would have gotten right back up, it might look like it was a burden for him to bow, and therefore he's just interested in getting back up as quickly as possible. He doesn't want to be bothered with it. But instead, Sheshes wanted to show that it is a tremendous privilege to bow before the Ribono Shel Olam. And therefore, what did he do? He bowed down in one swoop, right? Showing the eagerness to go ahead and bow. But when he got back up in a more gradual fashion to show that there is absolutely no burden upon him. So beautiful. One more line. Kalashana kula adam mispalo hakel hakadosh melech oiv tzedakah mishpat chutz me'asar yom shebein Rosh Yom Kippurim shemispal hamelech hakadosh va'melech hamishpat. So the Gemara says over here, throughout the year in Shmona Esrei, we conclude Shmona Esrei the bracha of hakel hakadosh and melech ohev tzedakah mishpat, the king who loves tzedakah and mishpat. And what happens? But during Aseret Mitzvah, during 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we switch it and we say Hamelech HaKadosh and Hamelech HaMishpat. Why that change? Because God assumes many different identities, but the primary identity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu during Yomim Noraim is a king. So what we do is we switch our references. So we don't call HaKadosh Baruch Hu Akel HaKadosh, rather we call him Hamelech HaKadosh, the king, the holy king, because he's sitting in judgment of the world. That's his monarchical identity. We don't say Melech Ohev Tzedakah Umishpat. God is the one who loves kindness and judgment. No, Melech HaMishpat. He is the king, ultimately, again, of judgment. Rabbi, so we'll stop over here for tonight. We'll pick up in Meretz Hashem with that conversation next week. Everyone is invited to join us for Chasidus right now in the base medrash.